Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Digital Drop podcast. The topic of today's conversation is the diary of a COO, what not to do on your transformation journey. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Julian Davis. Julian is currently the Chief Operating Officer at World Commerce and Contracting. Julian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Obviously, I know you for quite a while now, and you're a well-known name within the membership sector. But for those of you who are coming across you for the first time, can you tell us just a little bit about your background and how you ended up leading operational change at such a senior level?
Yeah, so I'm relatively new to membership. I've coming up to 4 years now with World Commerce and Contracting, which is a global organization, not for profit membership. We have members across 180 different countries, and our staff are all globally based as well. So it's a relatively new industry for me, but I've worked in quite a few industries across my career. So I started out in the defense industry where I was doing software development. And I then moved into banking, where I was moved more into systems management and networking. And from that, I then moved on into operational leadership roles, leading teams. And beyond that, that then led into project change and project management. So that was my early part of my career. For the last 15 years or so, I've been doing interim management, focusing on a variety of different organizations in different industries. So that's banking, working in insurance, the energy industry, oil industry, even the music industry, delivering IT change, significant programs of change, and quite often then undertaking operational activities in those organizations to help embed that change.
I love it when I'm speaking to somebody who's got such a varied background across multiple sectors, because not only do you have a perspective on how things are going right and sometimes not so right within the current sector you're in, you can actually have a bit more of a bird's eye view on the broader landscape and figure out what's a sector specific challenge versus an overall challenge. So based on your experience, Julian, what are the most frequent mistakes organizations make when they start some form of a transformation journey?
I think it starts from the very beginning, which is making sure they've got a clear understanding of what it is they're trying to achieve. So, what is the outcome that they're focused on? What is it they're hoping to achieve when they finish that piece of change? And to make sure they focus on those business objectives rather than worrying too much about the solution. So I think if they can focus on that change and then make sure that they manage that through that project life cycle, manage the scope, and make sure they don't drift too much away from their original objective.
And typically, we know that more often than not, digital transformations don't end up as successful as initially envisaged. And why do you think so many well-intentioned transformation projects actually still fail to deliver on their objectives that were set out initially?
Well, it's interesting specifically in the membership sector, where a lot of organizations are very resource light and they don't necessarily have the expertise that larger corporates have in terms of IT departments, etc. So I think one of the first things is to make sure that you invest in external expertise. So go out there and invest that money to get people that are used to managing change on this scale. Trying to rely on your people that have a day job to do that is probably the first mistake, I would say. And once you've gone through that, make sure you have full transparency, put the governance in place so that you've got not just the weekly project meetings, but regular sponsor updates. You're updating the exec team, you're updating your board, and you're updating your staff on what's happening. And not just updating your staff, but making sure you take them on the journey with you. So I'm a big believer that you have to have we've got all of our staff literally at World CC involved in this change that we're going through at the moment, and they've been involved from the very outset. I want all of those people on the bus with me going on that journey so that when we deliver it, they know what we've delivered, why we've delivered it, and they're all bought into using it.
Yeah, it's often people are often overlooked when it comes to digital transformation, but I often say that digital transformation at its essence is about people and innovation. From a leadership perspective, when leading a large scale transformation within a complex organization, which you've got bucket loads of experience in, what would you say are the most important leadership qualities that you have to bring to the table?
I think first and foremost, it's giving that clear direction from the outset. That piece we talked about already, making sure that everybody understands what we're doing, but why we're doing it as well. I think you need to be prepared to listen to different points of view. So the staff that are working on the ground and doing the day-to-day job know their job, know the challenges they're facing better than you do. So you need to listen. And then I guess the more tricky stuff is around trying to balance the inevitable wish list of scope versus the budget you've got available and the time you've got to do it. And that means making some decisions that aren't necessarily going to please everyone.
Yeah, well, that nicely leads me on to what was going to be my next question, which is, obviously we've been involved in a lot of digital transformation projects, and when you're going around talking to various stakeholders, understanding different requirements, you get a very complex, broad wish list, and a lot of those items are incongruent with one another. So how do you ensure alignment across the different departments of an organization when you're leading a transformation at an organizational level?
I think you have to recognise that people are at the heart of this, and different people are going to react differently to change. I've got some people in the team at the moment who are all gung ho and just want to get on and let's do the change, and I can see it's going to be better. And I've got other people that are clinging on to the existing process and they're a little bit resistant and they're not quite so comfortable with going through that change. So you need to recognize that, and then you need to manage all those different stakeholders to make sure that they are on the journey. Some will get there quicker, some will take longer, but it's getting them through that change curve and out of that other side so that they're bought in and they are become advocates for what you're doing. But I guess, and that's across the whole organization. So it starts from the very beginning. And if you can get people involved from the very beginning, they feel more invested in what you're doing. So making sure you get as many people involved in defining the requirements, involving people in evaluating the different options, get people involved. And nowadays, a lot of what's delivered is agile. So the approach of Agile is that you can see things happening in front of you. You're not waiting 4 months for a build to happen. People now have out of the box solutions that they can figure in front of you. You can see what's happening. You can have input to that. So getting everybody involved in those levels, and then that final test. Make sure you test it again, and then test it again to make sure everybody's comfortable with what's being delivered. But also, I would say make sure you train. Make sure your staff are fully comfortable with what they need to be doing on a day-to-day basis, not just before you go live, but you need to train people after you've gone live as well. Some people pick things up quicker than others.
Yeah, absolutely. But you've used a couple of words that I love to hear when talking about this, and one of them is agile. I think agility is key, but the other one is process. I often like to say that digital transformation, oh sorry, journey. The digital transformation is a journey and not an event. And along this journey, there's different rates at which you achieve user and stakeholder adoption. But at the end of the day, if you don't achieve it, regardless of how good a solution you implement, if people are not using it in the right way, you're still not going to achieve that success. And in my experience, user adoption has been a major challenge. So I've seen transformations where a great solution and workflow systems have been put in place to manage everything, but due to individual anxiety across various levels, people will still default back to keeping files stored on local computers, creating spreadsheets for certain tasks. How do you manage user adoption when implementing new solutions?
Well, it's interesting actually. Many of the organizations I worked for when I was doing interim management brought me in to deliver a project or a program of change. Um, and the way in which they dealt with it in many instances is I got retained after the project had delivered to then take on an operational role to embed best practice and the new processes into the business as usual environment. So quite often I was retained for 12 months, 6 to 12 months, just to make sure that change was adopted properly. And an adoption, I think, is key. I speak to so many organizations in the membership sector who seem to be every 4 or 5 years going through a new CRM project. We're doing a new CRM. Didn't you do one 4 years ago? Yeah, but it doesn't work, so we need a new one. And I kind of had that when I arrived here at World CC. And what I discovered is, yes, the product we chose wasn't the best product, but actually half the problem was our fault, and that was around adoption. Adoption wasn't done properly. People weren't required to use the system. People were given flexibility, I don't really like it. I'll do it the old way still. So you've got to get that adoption right. You've got to make sure that people are on board and people are using the system properly, and that doesn't stop at go live. That has to carry on into business as usual.
Yeah, so one of the frustrations that I personally have is people look at digital transformation as a project with a beginning, middle, and end. And that's why we don't like to use that phrase. We've coined the phrase digital evolution, because in my personal experience and belief, I don't think it ever ends. And what you're saying there, so to some extent, I think reinforces that, as in, because there might be an initial delivery. But with how long these projects take, what we initially envisage, and by the time we get that delivered, even if we get it delivered, on time, on budget, with the requirements we came up, chances are that's not necessarily going to be fit for purpose moving forward. So how do we get away from this cycle of transformation, then 3 to 5 years down the line, new transformation and complete migration to everything else? This seems to be a trend that's been prominent for the last 20 odd years, certainly since I've been in the business. We always used to say these systems have a 3 to 5 year shelf life.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on what can be done to avoid that reset that has to keep happening?
Well, I think if you take a step back and look at the marketplace, there are people moving from one system onto another system every 3 to 5 years. Now, what I'm seeing is the system providers aren't necessarily changing. So people are taking on suppliers and their solution that other people are choosing to move off of, which raises the question in my mind whether the problem actually sits with the solution or not. Because some people obviously are evaluating them and going, this solution's the right one for me. So I would suggest that it's not the solution that's the problem, it's the adoption and that improvement, continuous improvement that happens in the organization, the culture. And I think that's where people need to focus. Yes, you need to choose a solution that's fit for purpose and meets your needs. We're a global organization. We selected a system that was not fit for purpose because it doesn't deal globally. It doesn't deal in multi-currency. It doesn't handle those things that we needed. So yes, we made a mistake choosing a solution. We will make sure that the next time we choose the right solution, that we go through the right set of requirements. And once that's in place, then you need to make sure that you make the best out of it. And that's where the culture of the organization needs to change. We need to get into a culture of continuous service improvement, which means deliver the product and then continue to invest in it, continue to evolve the product, the way you work, and continue to look at ways in which you can make the best out of it. The product providers, they have roadmaps for their product. They're constantly delivering new releases. It's delivering new functionality. Don't just stay on the version that you went on when you went live. understand what they're delivering, evaluate it. Is it going to add value to your business? Can you change the way you're doing things? And keep investing. And if you keep investing and you keep using the system and getting the more out of it, you'll avoid that trap of 3-5 years time going, oh, it's not doing what we need it to do now, we need a new CRM solution.
I couldn't agree more with just about everything that you said, especially the keep investing bit. There seems to be a mindset around this being a capital expenditure, a one-off investment, and that's it. Once you spend that, we're good to go. But in reality, it should be treated as an ongoing business as usual cost. That continuous investment needs to be seen as a continuous overhead. Now, what else I've noticed is most organizations take a reactive approach to digital transformation. And going back a few years during COVID, I think COVID became a little bit of a catalyst for a lot of sectors where it was do or die. And we've seen massive exponential growth within technology adoption and digital transformation. How do we instill a different culture at the leadership level where we start to see transformation as something that we do proactively and we plan for rather than address when things are creaking and things start breaking?
So I guess to start off with, I think you need both. So we've certainly seen in the past 4 or 5 years that you need to be adaptable. You need to be able to react to changes in the environment. We've seen the pandemic, we've seen significant political change, we're seeing economic impact. So this has an impact on us as membership associations, and we need to be adaptable. But you need to have that balance. And so you need to have that long-term strategy and those changes planned into a 3-year roadmap that says this is what we're striving to achieve. These are supporting our business strategic goals, and this is our direction of travel. And I think if you can look to have 80-90% of the activities you're doing around change planned, but leave yourself some resource, and by resource I mean people and money, to handle the unforeseen change. For example, we within our IT budget now, we put aside 10% of our budget for innovation. And it's called innovation. What it basically means is it's the stuff that we haven't thought of that we're going to have to do this year. So plan for it, to be reactive, but I think you have to get into that behavior of having a long-term vision and getting your staff to focus on those strategic things. And I know it's difficult because everyone wants to react to that immediate thing, and I need this doing and I need that doing, but you have to carve out the time and the resource to drive those strategic initiatives forward. Otherwise, you just won't make those big significant changes that are needed.
Yeah. So going back to the previous point around the technology and systems not necessarily being the wrong systems. I agree. Although we say one size does not fit all, generally speaking, when it comes to digital technologies for most organizations, there are multiple technologies that would do the job right. So I agree with you that the problem isn't necessarily the technology, it's between the needs and the technology, which is people, essentially. And, having worked across both private and public sectors, membership sectors, the various verticals, I have noticed a big cultural difference. As difficult as digital transformation is everywhere, in the private sector, where we're used to measuring our success, where you can't necessarily hide behind feel-good vanity metrics, things do seem to go and progress a little bit better than in a sector such as the membership sector. Based on your experience, what things within the not-for-profit or membership sector add additional complexity to a digital transformation that you wouldn't necessarily see across other sectors?
I don't think it's that it necessarily adds additional complexity. I think it has a mix of the same challenges, but then slightly different challenges. So a lot of what I see wanting to be done in the membership sector is fundamentally not a lot different from what I've seen in other sectors. But you have to bear in mind that certainly where I am in my organization, it's a not-for-profit organization. We have a finite set of funds, we have a fairly small set of resources, and there I think the challenge we have is that we want to do the same kind of change as other industries and other organizations, but we don't have the finances and the resources to do it as quickly. So it takes longer. I think also back to one of the points I made earlier is because we have finite resources and they are fundamentally focused on delivering member value and membership services, they may not be familiar. I don't find that I've got many people in my organization that are very IT literate and come from an IT background. So the skills and the capability in the organization, if I try and do it with what I've got, it will either take much longer or I will fail. So I've got to go out and find the resources to do that, but that costs money and money is scarce. So therefore I have to scale back the amount of, I have to change the time it's going to take me to implement change. And that comes with its own challenges. So from my experience, delivering change quickly ensures that you've got a better chance of hitting what you were trying to achieve from the outset. The longer a change takes, the more that everything moves on, and the more likely it is that what you're delivering at the end of that is what you set out to deliver, but what's needed is no longer the same thing. So it's a different set of challenges in the membership sector, and it's something that is I'm certainly finding is causing me a different set of issues to deal with than what I had to deal with in previous sectors.
Okay, yeah, and especially when it comes to anything to do with how you spend that money, there's also a lot more bureaucracy and process going around
Yeah,
it.
yeah. There's that govern, and I work, and I've spoken to quite a few people about this, and I think different organisations have a different governance structure. But you are effectively spending your members' money, and you need to be held accountable. And there are governance structures in place to make sure that that investment is being done with the best intentions and with the benefit for the members in mind. So yes, there are those that governance to follow, but at the same time, I would argue that in any other organisation, you've got investors, shareholders, stakeholders that also need to be feeling that their investment is being well spent as well. So it's slightly different, but it's a similar challenge.
It it is, but what I find, and I'd love to get your opinion on it, I would find within this particular sector, um, the governance, as important as it is, does make it difficult to set transformation journeys off on the right footing because it makes it difficult to create an aspect of agility. There needs to be clear definition of what, why, when. Essentially, there's three constraints in every project. There's the time frame, there's the need, and there's the budget. And within the sector, due to governance, essentially we find ourselves almost forced into a waterfall type approach to delivering these projects, which kills that innovation and agility. Is it time for organizations to start questioning that governance process?
Well, it's difficult for me to comment on that because I've had a similar conversation with a number of other people within the membership sector, and I understand where you're coming from. From a personal perspective, having only worked in one membership organisation, I've obviously lucked out because I don't find that in my organisation. I've got a governance structure in place with a board and an exec team that are all fully supportive and on board and understand what I need to do. And they are freeing up the resources, both financially and people wise, to enable me to do it. And I guess part of that has been building confidence. So in the early days, I set out some fairly aggressive delivery plans for the first year or so that I was in position, which it would be fair to say met with some skepticism from the board. But we got to the end of the year, and I tracked that at each of the board meetings and reported back. And we got to the end of the year, and they were like astounded at what we'd achieved with such little resource. So I think that built a level of confidence. And since then, I've found that the board, whenever I go to them and say, this is what I want to do, this is why we need to do it, they're very supportive, and they allow me to get on and deliver it. So I've been lucky from that perspective, but I have spoken to people that I understand have more of a challenge persuading their through their governance structure the need to do things.
Yeah, the board, or in many cases, board of trustees or directors, whatever the case may be, can often be the most difficult stakeholders to manage. And I think you've been lucky, but I wouldn't put it all down to luck. Knowing you for the short time that I do know you, I'm sure that you influenced their mindset from the outset by being willing to challenge certain things. If only every organization had a Julian, like life would be a lot easier. So I do feel that there are technology is very cyclical, but I do feel that we're coming to a point where, we're in the midst of our fourth industrial revolution, but we're coming to a point where technology is lending itself to that agility more. And we're entering a phase where the world is moving towards, more of a Mac architecture. For those that don't understand that, it's microservices, API first, composable, headless. What are your thoughts on the Mac movement and where technology is at the moment? And is there any preference from an architecture perspective, based on your experience, on what organizations should be focusing on?
So when I arrived here at World CC, the route that the organisation had gone down was to find themselves an association management system. So we are initially incorporated in the US. We have quite heavily influenced in the US, and they refer to AMS solutions, what we possibly call a CRM. But the search for that solution had been to find something that could do everything for everyone. And they found a solution that could do something for everybody, but it did exactly that. It did some things for everybody, but not everything that everybody wanted. And so when I arrived, that investment had been done very recently, and it wasn't financially viable for me literally to arrive and rip it all out and start again. So we've had to live with certain aspects of what we've invested for a number of years now, but I've looked at changing our architecture and what we use. So the way we did that was to focus on best of breed tools for different requirements. So we've introduced HubSpot for marketing because the marketing team really liked HubSpot, and they really were not getting the best out of the tool we had, which was the marketing capabilities within the CRM. So they adopted HubSpot. The next logical step was for us then to put the business development, the sales team onto the same tools, so that as marketing went out and identified leads, those leads could naturally fall across to the business development team to follow up and try to turn those leads into members. So we've gone down that route. We have most organizations that are into learning have a separate learning management solution. They probably have a separate financial system, so we use Xero at the back end. And so we've gone down that route of finding different tools. We've recently invested into a new event app, so we've now got our own bespoke event app that will turn into a member app once our new CRM solution arrives. So that's the route we're going down, and many of the issues that we experience with our existing systems have been because we've tried to configure and customize those solutions to do something it wasn't originally designed to do. So when we now look to take a CRM solution, we want it to do the CRM bit, which is all about membership management, much of which sits invisible to our members because it happens in the background. What our members really see is our website, our member portal. Now that happens to all be linked into the CRM, but that's not what they see firsthand. So it's finding those best tools, and then, as you just said, making sure that they all talk nicely to each other. So all of the solutions that we've got, one of the key things we start out with any solution that we're looking at is how easily does it integrate? Has it got an open API service? Can we link it together? In fact, even better, does it already link with the systems we've got? And because we've chosen industry leading solutions, what we are now finding is that many other solutions, as we look at them, already have an integration built, so we don't have to invest into that.
So you walked into an organization with a monolithic architecture, and you've gradually moved out to a composable architecture.
We're getting there.
Yeah, it's a journey, like we said earlier, right? But yeah, I think certainly one of the biggest challenges, and this isn't really just a challenge towards future transformation. It's what becomes huge technological debt, but it's these huge monolithic solutions that do a lot more than they were supposed to. And in recent years, due to the advancements in cloud infrastructure and due to the mass movement of all software vendors to a SaaS licensing model, what it does mean is that smaller organizations can have access to best of breed technologies at a relatively low cost because it's perpetual licensing, it's usage based. So yeah, I absolutely agree with the approach, and the general message that we want to send out there is use the software for what it's been intended to and nothing more. If you find yourself bending software to do that little bit extra, ultimately it might seem like a short-term win, but in reality you're creating additional debt. So how do we measure the success of a transformation? How do we know if we're on track or not? The reason why I'm asking you this is I've seen so many successful digital transformations that I would call out as not being successful because they might be successful in a particular time frame or when you look at it as a project in its own right, but again 3-4 years down the line everything's having to be taken out and redone again. So if you look at it on a bigger time frame, you can hardly define it as a success. How do you go about measuring the success of a transformation journey?
So I think let's break that down into two things, I guess. One is the transformation project and the other one is the journey. So both of them, in my opinion, need a clear strategy in place for the business. So if you haven't got a strategy, if you don't know where you're heading and why you're heading there, how can you do transformation? So that's the first thing. Have a very clear strategy, preferably out 5 years so that you can see where you're aiming to be and why. You need to be adaptable. Things change. COVID hits. We've got economic change, political change, variety of other things. You might have changes in terms of competition, etc. So you need to be adaptable and you need to review that strategy. But fundamentally, the strategy should stand, and it may need just tweaking rather than completely rewriting. Once you've got that, if you then decide that you need to do a transformation project, as we said at the very start, make sure you're clear what you're doing and why you're doing it and the outcomes you're trying to achieve. Don't try and measure success of a project at the end of the project. Define what success looks like at the beginning of the project. Then you know what you need to be measuring in order to see whether you've achieved it or not. Whether that's membership growth, whether it's improving retention, whether it's getting your members to engage more, whether it's around the number of people that register for learning programs, whatever those measures are, put something together that justifies why you're doing that change and the impact you're expecting it to have. and then make sure you've got the means in which to measure it. So there's no point putting a measure in place that you can't measure. And then I think outside of the project, if you think around the organisation as a whole, I don't know what other membership associations do, but we as an association have a 5-year strategy that defines where we want to get to. And as part of that, each year, all of our staff have a key set of objectives which are linked to some of our association metrics that says we want to grow our membership by X percentage this year in this particular region or in this particular area. And those metrics then roll forward to the next year where they all accumulate in order to achieve what our overall strategy is. So the metrics aren't just around the project, it needs to be around the business as usual as well. And how they achieve those metrics is then where you require your staff to step up and look at the ways in which they can improve service. If we want to grow retention, how are we going to do that? Why are people leaving in the first place? Understand that, and then get the data, analyze it, understand it, and start to use it to make decisions.
Yeah, I always like to say, if you can't measure it, don't do it. Because we don't want to base success based on opinions of people, right?
No.
But look, I don't mean to be fear mongering to anybody listening. The trends are that we are getting better at transformation. We are learning. Technology is moving in the right direction. We're getting to a point where it seems to be consistently moving in the right direction. One failed digital transformation after another at a time. If you had to give, let's say, 3 what not to do's, what not to do rules for somebody who's playing a leadership role and they're at the outset of the transformation journey, what would be those top 3 don't do's?
I've probably already touched on them, but the first one to me would be not to rush into it. Make sure you've got a clear strategy, make sure you've got some defined outcomes, make sure you've got a plan of how you're going to achieve it. So that would be the first one. Don't rush into it. The second one for me would be do not try to deliver it without the right skills and capabilities in place. So experienced people will give you a much better chance of success. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to be permanent resources. If the task at hand is a project-based activity, use some external resource to come in and help you achieve that. But I've always been a big advocate of recruit the best people you can afford, preferably people who know more about the subject than you do, and then empower them to make a difference. And the third thing for me is don't stop transforming once you've delivered a project. Transformation, as we've talked about, is a journey. It continues through business as usual. You need that continual service improvement ethic and culture in the organisation. And that comes back to getting the best people. If you've got the best people in place that you can, they will want to improve what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. They will identify opportunities to improve, and they will drive those through and own them if you've got the right people in place.
I think those are 3 incredibly comprehensive and valuable bits of advice that I would certainly second. We can't touch upon this conversation, or we can't conclude this conversation without touching upon the new buzzword within the industry, AI. It's a little bit of a something that's a spanner in the mix, so to say. In your opinion, what role is AI going to play in digital transformation and within the membership sector? And is it something that we already know, or it's yet to be defined?
I see AI as another tool that we should be looking to use to make our jobs easier. And I remember a couple of years ago having a conversation with my CEO where she was saying, AI is the thing, what are we doing about it? How are we going to use it? And at the time I was very my view was AI was a solution looking for a problem. So tell me what the problem is you think we can solve with the AI, and then we can start to look at it. So I held the CEO off for a couple of years, and at the same time was talking to a number of organizations in this space to understand what they were doing elsewhere, where things were going. And ultimately, then we've adopted AI last year and started to work on a project internally to use AI to help our members get answers to key questions around contract and commercial management, and allow them to have a much better experience when accessing our content hub. So I think AI is technology that's there. It's not going away. It's not a case of when it's going to happen, if it's happening. It's happening now. Organizations, I think, for the last few years have been listening to talks about AI and talking about what could it do if only it could do that, and it has the potential to do this. I think we've gone past that now. We are now seeing real results being delivered, organizations starting to use AI, and those people that don't are going to end up falling behind. So don't be afraid of it. I know there are lots of organizations out there. There are that will support people that want to know more about AI, and it's just another tool, and it will help us.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I've spent the last 3 years of my life pretty much traveling from conference to conference, looking at all sorts of AI technologies, meeting with vendors, and I must have looked at several hundred solutions out there. But what I've noticed with the audience, let's say at these events, it's very polarized. There's people that are excited about it, and see the potential, and then there's the fear mongering side, and people that feel robots are going to take over and this is the beginning of the end. And there's very little in between. In my experience, I think the objective is, what you use the right word, AI is a tool. Don't think of the tool first. Think of what your challenge is, and then add into your process. Can we streamline any of this through AI? Because in what I've seen so far, AI is an opportunity to significantly leapfrog some very difficult and costly tasks, that we have to overcome within a digital transformation journey. So I'm with you. I think it's a tool. It can certainly help, but it's certainly not going to do anything for us. Like any bit of software, it's only as good as the humans behind it.
And it's not unusual for us to find people that with those differing opinions. If you think around adoption of products and the take up, you get those people that are early adopters that want to experiment, that want to use it, and it takes a bit of time to get more and more people interested and more people trying it before it becomes an accepted way of working. And you can see that with a whole host of different products, from when personal computers were first introduced, when the World Wide Web came around, smartphones. You can see it with all of those things, that it takes time for people to get comfortable, and then they start to use it, and it becomes just simply a way of doing business. So I'm sure that AI will get there. I guess the challenge we've got is that over the decades, the speed with which adoption is happening has increased exponentially. So the time it took for us to adopt older technologies and the time it's now taking for us to adopt these new technologies is drastically quicker. So
Yeah.
with AI now, we need to recognize that, that there are millions of people out there now using it, and we need to understand it, not be afraid of it, and start to look at ways in which it can help our business.
Absolutely. And we absolutely cannot ignore it. It's something that's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And it's actually nothing new, nor are the challenges we're trying to overcome. It's just all come together at a time when all the dots seem to connect. Julian, we've had maybe 10 conversations since we initially met, and I can say in every single one I've walked away with a newfound respect for your experience and knowledge. It's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you. I think I wish we had another hour or two, because I'm sure we could dig deeper on a lot of these topics. But hey, we can do it again. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate your wisdom, your experience, and your openness to share that with our audience.
Thank you very much for having me. And if anyone wants to reach out and ask me any questions, they can feel free, find me on LinkedIn, and very happy to continue any of the conversations that we've had today.
Fantastic. We'll make sure we include the link to your LinkedIn and socials wherever the podcast is published. Thank you again, Julian. I hope that was useful for everybody out there listening, and I look forward to our next conversation whenever that may be. Thanks, Julian.
Great. Thanks very much.